try and use gouache paint which is freshly squeezed out of the tube. Gouache is water based and it reactivates when you add water to it, but the consistency of a freshly squeezed paint and a paint which is reactivated by adding water is very much different. You can never bring back that creamy consistency in a reactivated paint. So make it a habit not to squeeze a lot of paint onto your palette. You can always squeeze out more if you are in need. Now if in case there is some leftover paint on your palette, before you start painting, spray some water on it and keep it aside for 10 to 15 minutes. Let the paint absorb the water. You won't get that creamy consistency back, but then this will help in reactivating the paint. Whenever you feel like your paint is too dry and if you're not able to blend the colors properly, never be afraid to add a drop of water to it. You shouldn't be dipping your entire brush in water, just a gentle touch of water is all you need. That tiny drop of water is going to make your blending process a lot easier. Here for the first batch, I went in with the paint directly squeezed out of the tube, and for the second one, I added a drop of water, and you can clearly see the difference here. One of the main reasons why artists love gouache is that you can apply multiple layers on top of the base layer. This is one of the most interesting property of gouache. But when you're applying multiple layers, you will have to wait for the background layer to dry completely before you go in with the next layer. So I have added a black line here. Now if I want to add some details onto this, if I went in as soon as I laid the paint, I won't be able to get crisp lines. So I added some white lines onto that black background, and you can clearly see the lines are looking very faded and blurry. This is because our base layer is still wet, and when we are adding the second layer, we are disturbing the base layer. The lines we added now, they are not at all looking opaque and crisp. Now we'll wait for this to dry and we'll repeat the same exercise and we'll see the difference. Now that black line has dried, now I'm applying some lines just like I did before. You can see the lines are looking a lot crisp and opaque now. This is just because the background has completely dried and you're applying paint onto that dried background. So no matter how gently I apply those details, if the background layer is wet, you won't get that crisp and clear lines. So you will have to wait for your background layer to dry completely before you add your details. To get those opaque details, there is one more thing you need to be careful about. You shouldn't be adding a lot of water into your paint. You should be going with a thick paint in order to get those opaque looking details. So depending on the kind of detail you are looking for, be careful about the amount of water you are adding into your paint. Gouache is an opaque medium, and to get a lighter tone, instead of water, we'll be using white. So more than any color, you will need quite a lot of white, and the first color you will be finishing in your gouache set will be white. Most of the gouache set has 2 white tubes, but that will be never enough. So get a big tube of white gouache, as big as possible. This is my White Nights gouache set and it has 2 white jars. And this is my 60 ml tube of white gouache which I got separately. So if you are someone who is looking forward to use gouache consistently, you will have to get a big tube of white. There is an interesting thing about gouache. The darker color, they tend to fade a bit. This is mainly because of the matte look of gouache paints. So here I have applied black and white onto my paper. I went in with a gradient wash, and you can see over the top and bottom the black is looking so dark and opaque. Now let's have a look at the same background when everything has dried. You can see it clearly here. Everything is looking a little faded. It is not as dark as earlier. So here is a comparison of the background when it was wet and when it has dried. So always try out your colors on a scrap piece of paper before you go with your main painting, especially when you're doing a commission or a huge painting. It will be a great idea to check your colors and understand the properties of it. Let's try out a gradient wash and let's see how we can make a smooth gradient. I'm starting with black, adding a horizontal line. I'm adding 2-3 lines of black on the top, then I will switch to white. When you're doing a gradient wash, you can either start from top to bottom or you can go the other way. You can go from bottom to top. But you shouldn't be starting from somewhere in the middle. You should either follow from top to bottom or bottom to top. Okay, I have added black. Now I'm switching to white. My paint is dry. I haven't added any water. I'm going with the freshly squeezed paint. I'm adding the white next to black and I'm trying to blend them. I will add some more white over the bottom. It is great to have a smooth and clean gradient wash in the background. This will automatically elevate your painting. Okay, I have added black and white. You can clearly see everything is looking so dry. I'm going to wash out the paint from my brush. Clean your brush properly. Now tap your brush on a paper towel. Make it clean. Once you have cleaned your brush, gently dip your brush in water. Go with clean water. As this is just an exercise, I haven't changed my water. So I dipped my brush in water. Just the tip of the brush has touched water. I haven't dipped my entire brush. Now I'm just running that damp brush on top of this layer. You can see I'm taking my brush from left to right in a horizontal manner. This is the only way I'm taking my brush. I'm not taking my brush in a crisscross manner, or I'm not adding any vertical lines. I'm just taking my brush in horizontal ways. So with that first round itself, our gradient wash is looking so much clean. I'm adding a little more white over the bottom. And again, I'm taking my brush from left to right in a horizontal manner and making the gradient more and more clean. If you're starting from the top, make sure you run your brush till you reach the bottom. And if you're starting from the bottom, you should be taking your brush until the top line. If you stop this in between, there will be a strong separation of colors. Your gradient wouldn't look smooth and clean. Now I'm running my brush one more time. You can see my gradient is looking so much smooth and better now. Okay, so this is the technique. Once you have applied your paint, run a slightly wet brush on top of the layer. You should be taking your brush only in a horizontal way. You shouldn't be adding any other kind of lines in between. The major thing you need to keep in mind is that you shouldn't be dipping your entire brush in water. You don't need a lot of water. The tip of the brush should just touch the water. If your brush is too watery, the paint will lose its opacity and it will start to look more like watercolor. So be sure not to add a lot of water on your brush. I think we discussed all basic things.